Here's my story. I'll break it up into the noise part and the objects part. Noise. A couple years ago, I was struggling with the worst bout of depression I've had since I was a teenager. My daughter is a teenager, and she lives with me full time. This night was pretty normal, and I don't remember anything unusual before going to bed, other than the fact that it was winter and there was a lot of freezing rain falling. However, once I was asleep, I woke up to a very loud thumping noise at about 2:30 in the morning or so. I stayed awake with my eyes open in the dark. I heard it again and again, in what seemed like a rhythmic pattern. I thought it was from my closet, but then when I turned in that direction, I heard it from what sounded like the opposite direction. It was louder and full on rhythm now, almost like a heartbeat. Again, I thought of music, but that didn't feel right, and I felt my fear rising. I started to think that maybe someone was trying to break into my house or was pounding on my front door, but I wasn't sure. I was concerned enough that I turned on my light and got my gun from my gun safe. Again, the sound was in a full-on rhythm, and the hallway was dark under my bedroom door, which was shut. I opened the door and quickly turned on the hall light and checked in the nearby rooms. Nope, nothing. Strangely, the sound didn't really change despite the fact that I changed locations in the house. I started worrying about my sanity on top of whatever threat there may or may not have been. I checked on my daughter and woke her up. I asked if she heard the noise and she said yes after a few moments. Well, at least I wasn't just hearing things. To speed the story up, we checked the living room, bathrooms, entry doors, all locked, and the door to the garage, also locked. The sound was still there. I began to think it was a vent on top of the roof that had gone bad once and made some weird noises in the hallway. So I got up the nerve to disable the alarm and check my backyard and look on the roof, and at my roof vents. Here's where it started to get a little too weird for me. The sound couldn't be heard outside, at all. Nothing was blowing or banging on the windows. My vents were silently spinning, and the noise was inside. My vents were silently spinning, but the noise was inside. I confirmed this by going back inside the house and the noise was still there. I then went to the garage and didn't hear the noise. The doors were all shut as well. I came back in and we tried to figure it out. Finally, the noise kinda just went away. We were very bothered, but after searching the house a few times, we went to bed. It was difficult to sleep after that. Objects. Several days later, I was still a bit shaken up from the situation and had been researching what it could have been. I didn't have any answers that made sense. This one morning I went to the living room to look for the remote to turn on the TV. I was annoyed because the battery cover was missing on it, but I turned on the TV and moved on. I then ran across the remote again in another room with the cover on. This was strange, so I went back into the living room, and there was a coverless remote right where I left it. Both remotes were identical Vizio TV remotes otherwise. Both worked on my TV, and we didn't really have any other Vizio devices in the house. This bothered me more than normal because of how close it happened to the noise, but I was okay and just tried to work it through my head. I continued on with my day, and I opened the kitchen drawer to get the jar opener. We have one that came from a Pampered Chef's party my ex had thrown, so we only had that one. Well, not anymore. Now there were two in that drawer. At this point, I started to have an existential crisis of sorts. This all really bothered me, and I had my daughter verify that she saw both of each object, which she did. These are the pics. To make things even stranger, a third object appeared to have been duplicated. I don't remember what it was. In fact, even almost right after it happened, I had trouble remembering what object it was every time I attempted to tell the story or recall it. I just remember there was a third item and it freaked me out even more than the others. I still can't remember what it is no matter how hard I try. A few days later, I found out my ex's sister-in-law was missing a TV remote to her Vizio TV. Yup, it was missing a battery cover. I have no idea why it was in my house, but it did turn out to be hers. The other objects have never been claimed. I never had any good explanations for these events, but I have one slight possibility for the noise. I had a friend say that her floor vents in the house flooded one time, and she experienced that noise. It's not a bad explanation, I do have floor vents, however it never happened since, and I never saw water in the vents. This was about a month ago, and I keep thinking back on it. I hope I can find some kind of explanation for this, as I've never experienced anything like this before or since. I, female 21, go for runs with my dog most nights when I get home from work. I've been at my parents' house since March because campus housing kicked us out due to the virus. It's a safe and chill area, so I've never had anything weird or concerning happen when out at a night run. Until like a month ago in early June when we went out for a run at 11 p.m. After a while, we both started back at a walking pace to get a cool down. Then I noticed a man walking a German Shepherd dog parallel to us on the opposite side of the street. After a moment of us walking parallel to each other, I looked again, and they had both stopped. I first thought, okay, the dog probably had to stop to pee. I kept walking and my dog stopped to smell something, so I looked back at them again. I don't know how else to describe it other than they were frozen. Both the man and the dog were in the middle of taking a step, but they were completely still, as if the universe just hit pause as they were walking. It was late at night, but it was all pretty well lit on the streets. I'm fairly certain this wasn't darkness playing tricks on my eyes. It was well lit enough for me to easily see that this guy was wearing blue Nike brand hoodie, jeans, and sunglasses, all weird attire for a gross 90-degree night in South Texas, and the dog had a colorful, bedazzled leash. The decently strong breeze didn't move the guy's baggy hoodie or the dog's thick fur. I couldn't see his eyes because he was wearing sunglasses at night, but the dog's eyes were forward and weren't blinking. This was an extremely unsettling stillness that I've never seen in my life. The closest thing I can compare it to is a character animation falling in a video game, so it ends up stuck in space. I had stood there for at least 2 to 3 minutes because I was able to start and finish a song in my playlist that I had going when I first paused to look back at them. Neither of them budged an inch. Eventually, I was too afraid to stay and see what happens, so we started walking again. I had such an unsettling and anxious feeling, and I just kept looking back over my shoulder to see them still firmly in place. They didn't move for as long as I was able to see them when I looked back. I have never experienced something like this before or since then. I've never hallucinated, but I am on Wellbutrin for anxiety, ADHD, and depression. I suppose that my brain messing with me isn't completely impossible, but it is hard to believe because I've never seen anything unusual like this before. It was extremely creepy in a way that's hard to describe, and I haven't ran on that street at night since then. So, my husband and I are huge joyriders. We drive around a lot in our island province, and we have varied landscapes which we get to enjoy while driving. On a particular drive out, we were heading home from up north that made the drive shorter, and we didn't have to traverse through the mountains to get back. It was late in the afternoon, around 5:30, when we entered the highway, and it started out pretty normal. My kids were in the back talking to each other, and my doggie was in my lap. She started barking ferociously for no reason, and I couldn't seem to make her stop. As we got deeper onto the highway, lodged between the mountains, she got uncharacteristically quiet, and then fell off asleep. I figured she may have just been tired. The kids also fell asleep, so we drove quietly. I realized at some point that the drive was taking far longer than it should, and had gotten incredibly dark. It didn't occur to me to check my watch, but from what I could tell, we'd been on the highway for more than an hour, and we weren't even a quarter of the way through. I'm quite familiar with the highways here, and I have a photographic memory, so I have mental landmarks to know where we are from one point to another. I didn't say anything to jinx us, and I didn't want to call out any bad things to happen, so I kept quiet. At the next bend, I realized that we passed the same few rows of houses, and the same people, and the same lotto outlet 3 times. I unconsciously took note of this during the drive, but every time we come to a bend, I would always see the same little town with the same people, laughing, smiling, and betting on lotto or sitting in front of their houses. This creeps me the fuck out. I casually try to broach this to my husband, only to realize he's noticed the same thing. It's like we were caught on a loop. At the current one we were at, we deliberately slowed down so we could see what the hell was going on. Some people went on their day to day, oblivious about us passing through, but the people around the lotto outlet stared at us, as if they knew something we didn't. Somehow, after the 5th iteration of this town, I finally see the church that signaled the end of the Trans Central Highway. We cross onto the main highway to take us back to the city. At this point, my kids and dog wake up. I checked my watch and it was only about 6 o'clock. The sky also wasn't dark yet, and the sun was just setting. I couldn't stop shaking, so we had to stop at the closest crowded town we could find. Needless to say, we no longer take the highway going to and from the north of the island. Mark, my husband, and I decide to make a quick trip to Walmart for a few things while my daughter kept an eye on her son at home. We leave the house at around 4:30 p.m., make it to Walmart, which is about 10 minutes away, and spend no more than 20 minutes grabbing a few items and waiting in line. We check out, then head back to the car. On our way back home, we thought to stop at McDonald's, 2 minutes away from Walmart, to grab a bite for the family, and I was pregnant, so I really craved McDonald's. We live close to the military base, so 5 to 6 p.m. traffic can get pretty backed up in that area. To our surprise, the roads weren't busy and it was actually fairly quiet. At this point, we're confused and concerned. Now we're wondering if something happened to where the people needed to seek shelter. We live in a town where tornadoes happen often, so I look to the sky for clues and notice the sun is close to setting, but nothing hinting of bad weather. I tell Mark to go look at how dark it is, and he goes, "Oh shit, the lights are on. WTF?" I look over and could tell he was thinking really hard. Now we've pulled into the McDonald's drive-thru where there's a line. Still baffled, I pick up my phone to call my daughter and notice that the time is a little after 7 p.m. I pause before making the call. I look to the clock in the car, which is very dim by the way, to confirm it's true. I kept repeating something was up. I called my daughter and asked her how long it's been since we left, and she said we'd been gone for a few hours. I don't make a big deal of this as I didn't want to freak her out. I rush my husband to place her order so we can get back home to the kids ASAP. I'm now shuffling through my purse for a receipt at Walmart for the timestamp, and as expected, it says we checked out at 5:08. Mark has been quiet since he noticed the car's lights were on. We pull into the house at 7:35. It's near dark and I sit in the car with my door open as my husband unloads the car and heads to the kids. I can see our front door from the highway, relieved that my kids are okay but afraid to make a scene because I was still freaking out, mentally piecing together the timeline for the past 2 to 3 hours, desperate trying to make sense of what happened. My husband returns and we're both sitting in silence. He looks at me and says, "I don't know, babe, I'm just glad we're home." This was 2 years ago and we talk about it every now and then as we did tonight.